36 hours. That's the countdown people are throwing around right now. Silvergeddon, a China export ban headline colliding with a sudden surge in delivery demand. And if those two pressures hit the same market at the same time, you don't get a normal price move, you get a stress test. Because silver isn't just a shiny metal people buy when they're nervous. It's a supply chain material, it's industrial oxygen. So if export flows tighten and delivery pressure spikes, the market doesn't ask politely, it splits. A screen price that tries to stay calm, and a physical market that starts screaming. But here's the trap. Most people will repeat the headline. Almost nobody will understand the mechanism. So today we're not doing hype, we're not doing panic theater, we're doing the only thing that matters in a crisis market. We're breaking down how this could actually work. What would an export ban or export restriction really change? What does a 26x delivery spike actually mean in plain English? And what signals would confirm this is real physical stress, not just viral noise? Because in every empire, the reset begins the same way. The official story stays smooth until supply starts saying no. Now let's define the word being used, like gasoline, Silvergeddon. People use it to mean one dramatic event where the world runs out of silver overnight. That's not how systems break. Systems break in stages. First, availability tightens, then delivery windows stretch, then premiums rise, then the market quietly starts offering alternatives, cash settlement, substitution, delay, and only after those quiet signals do you get the loud signals, the headlines, the public panic, the viral clips. So when you hear Silvergeddon in 36 hours, interpret it like this. Something might be pressuring physical supply at the exact moment demand for delivery is rising. That combination is rare, and it doesn't need to drain the world's vaults overnight. It only needs to create one dangerous thing, a loss of confidence in delivery, because the paper price system rests on a belief that physical supply exists if someone truly wants it, that delivery is possible, that the contract means something. When that belief cracks, the chart becomes a suggestion. Now we need to talk about the first half of the headline, China export ban. The internet loves turning friction into apocalypse. So think of this as a spectrum. On one end, a true ban, hard stop, nothing leaves. On the other end, restrictions that feel like a ban to the market, permits, quotas, inspections, priority allocation, longer delays. Functionally for pricing, both can do the same thing. They create friction. And in commodities, friction is everything, because global markets do not need a total shutdown to spike. They only need a bottleneck at the wrong time. If a major source region becomes harder to access, big buyers react instantly. They pay up to secure inventory. They pull supply forward. They stop assuming next month will be normal. That behavior alone can widen the gap between paper and physical. And here's the detail that matters more than the word ban. Even the rumor of restriction changes expectations. Expectations change behavior. Behavior changes flow, and flow changes price. When buyers stop trusting future supply, demand becomes urgent. Urgency is how you get dislocations. Now the second half of the headline, a 26x delivery spike. This sounds dramatic, but it needs translation. A delivery spike is not the same thing as trading volume. It is not the same thing as people speculating. A delivery spike means more participants are trying to turn paper exposure into real metal. That is the one request the paper system hates. Because paper markets are built for liquidity and hedging, not for everyone taking bars. So when delivery demand spikes, it often signals intent. Someone wants certainty. And when lots of people want certainty at the same time, the system is forced into a choice. Deliver metal, or find a way to settle without metal. And that choice is where price breaks. Now, I want you to understand why this is so dangerous when combined with export friction. If supply is tightening and delivery demand is spiking, then the next 36 hours are not about a chart. They're about behavior. In these moments, the truth leaks out through dealer language, call for price, limited availability, delivery times extended, premiums adjusted. It leaks out through spreads widening, through markets becoming less liquid, through institutions changing the way they quote. And if you want one sentence to hold on to as we go deeper, it's this. In a stressed market, you're not paying for silver. You are paying for guaranteed delivery. That's how two prices are born. One price for exposure, another price for certainty. That brings us to the next critical idea. Most people misunderstand what a vault is. They imagine one giant room full of bars and assume it's either full or empty. Real systems do not work like that. What matters is not how much metal exists in a building. What matters is how much is available. A vault can look full on paper while the deliverable supply is tight because a lot of that metal is already owned, allocated, or simply not for sale. So when people say Western vaults are being drained, the adult question is this. Drained from what category? Available to whom? At what price? In what form? Because the system can survive memes. It can survive panic videos. It can survive headlines. But it cannot survive one thing. A lot of people asking for the same physical metal at the same time. That is the moment the paper price gets tested. Here's where most people misunderstand the paper price. Paper pricing exists because most participants are trading exposure, not metal. It's a reference number that makes hedging possible. It's how industry plans. It's how dealers set a baseline, and it works as long as physical delivery is trusted. But when the physical market tightens, the first signal is not always the chart. The first signal is premiums, then delivery windows, then large bar availability. Then you start hearing a phrase whispered in the places that matter. Can't deliver. And if the system can't deliver, it rarely says so out loud. It offers alternatives: cash settlement, delayed delivery, substitution, special terms, anything that avoids the one thing that would expose the weakness. Too many claims chasing the same physical asset. So when you hear delivery demand is surging, ask yourself why. People don't demand delivery in bulk because they're bored. They demand delivery because they want certainty. That certainty might be about supply. It might be about counterparty risk. It might be about distrust. But the intent is the same. Stop trading the promise. Get the thing. Now let's connect this back to the China export story. Why would China matter so much for silver? Because in the real economy, silver sits in two worlds: money and industry. It's used in electronics, medical, automotive, and one of the biggest demand forces in the modern world, solar. So if a manufacturing engine is expanding and solar buildouts keep absorbing metal, physical demand can remain stubborn even when paper traders lose interest. And if supply becomes harder to access, local premiums can explode. But China pricing differently does not automatically mean the global price is wrong. It means the local market is tighter. A local market can do that for multiple reasons. Import friction can create a shortage in one place. Local taxes and premiums can push retail up. Bar form factor needs can create bottlenecks. Refining capacity can become a choke point. So when you hear $100 silver in one region, do not immediately assume global repricing. Instead, ask this: is it retail? Is it wholesale? Is it sustained? Is it spreading? Because a retail spike is easy. A sustained wholesale dislocation is rare. Now let's translate what a real dislocation looks like. A dislocation looks like persistent premiums that do not collapse after a week. It looks like delivery times extending, not normalizing. It looks like large bars becoming hard to source at scale. It looks like spreads widening and liquidity thinning. And it looks like the market shifting from casual to urgent. Urgent language is the tell. Now, how does a market go from normal to urgent in 36 hours? It usually happens through one emotional trigger: fear of missing supply. When buyers believe supply will be harder tomorrow than it is today, they pull forward demand. That does two things: it tightens supply even more, and it confirms the fear. That's how feedback loops form. Now add delivery demand surging, and the feedback loop becomes brutal. Because delivery demand is the one thing that forces physical truth into the paper world. If a lot of participants suddenly want metal, the system must respond. It can respond by raising price enough to reduce demand. It can respond by pulling in supply. Or it can respond by changing rules, tightening terms, and offering alternatives. And that last one is where the public starts to notice. Because when rules change, people panic. Now, let's talk about Western vaults again, but with a more precise lens. When people say vault, they imagine the metal is sitting there like a savings account. But institutional vaulting includes allocated, unallocated, eligible, registered, and more. Here's the simplest way to understand it. Some metal exists, but is not for sale. Some metal is deliverable, but only under specific conditions. Some metal can be mobilized, but only with time and cost. In a calm market, those categories don't matter much. In a stressed market, those categories become the entire story. Because buyers don't care that metal exists somewhere. They care whether it can be delivered to them, on time, in the right form, at a reasonable premium. And in a squeeze, the market discovers a brutal truth. Metal can be plentiful in total, while scarce in availability. That is how systems break without ever truly running out. Now we need to talk about why the word drained is misleading. Vault stress rarely looks like a sudden empty shelf. It looks like a thinning. Metal flows out quietly, withdrawals rise, restocking slows, the available pool tightens. Then one day the market realizes the metal was effectively gone weeks ago. The public does not see that process in real time. Institutions do. That is why you humpers will often see the retail crowd arguing about charts, while institutions are negotiating delivery terms. Now, if you want a practical way to keep this grounded, here's a simple rule. In every metal story, ignore the loudest number. Track the quietest trend. The quietest trend is usually availability, premiums, delivery windows, large bar sourcing, and most of all, whether regional price gaps persist. Because the gap is the message. If this is truly the setup people are claiming, then the next 36 hours will not be decided by a chart candle. It will be decided by whether supply responds smoothly, or whether the market starts showing stress behaviors. If Silvergeddon is real, it does not start with a crash. It starts with a refusal to quote, a refusal to commit, a refusal to deliver on the old assumptions. The first stage is friction. Friction shows up as small things that only professionals notice. A dealer who normally ships in a week now says 3 weeks. A supplier who normally has bars on hand now says limited availability. A premium that normally compresses now stays stubborn. Then the second stage appears. The market starts fragmenting. One market has metal, another market has price, a third market has contracts. And people begin to realize those are not the same thing. This is where the phrase paper versus physical becomes real. Paper is exposure, physical is certainty. In normal times, exposure and certainty are priced close together. In stressed times, certainty becomes expensive. Now, what could cause the stress wave to accelerate rapidly? This is where export friction and delivery spikes can create a perfect storm. Export friction narrows the pipeline. Delivery spikes increase the demand on the pipeline. If both happen together, there is no amount of messaging that fixes it. Only supply fixes it, or price fixes it. Because price is the rationing mechanism. If supply cannot expand quickly, price must rise enough to slow demand. Now, that is what people mean when they say Silvergeddon. Not that the world runs out, but that the market is forced to ration physical through premiums and availability restrictions. And in the modern world, this matters more because the paper price is still used as the reference for everything. So when the physical market begins to dislocate, the system becomes unstable. It becomes unstable for dealers because they cannot hedge physical reality perfectly with paper. It becomes unstable for industry because planning becomes uncertain. It becomes unstable for investors because the price they see is no longer the price that delivers metal. Now let's talk about what the 26x delivery spike might be signaling conceptually. There are a few possibilities. 1, a major buyer sees supply risk and wants inventory now. 2, a large player wants to force stress by requesting delivery. 3, participants distrust settlement and want the asset, not the promise. You don't need to know which one is true to understand the impact. In all cases, the impact is the same. The system must meet delivery demand, or it must change the rules of engagement. Now, here is where the market becomes political. If delivery pressure rises, some institutions become defensive. They reduce exposure, they widen spreads, they tighten terms. They become less willing to quote large size. This is why, in a real squeeze, liquidity disappears before price explodes. People think price explosion is the first sign. It's not. The first sign is the market becoming harder to trade. The second sign is premiums rising. The third sign is the narrative shifting from price to access. When people start asking where can I get it instead of what is it trading at, the market is already in a new phase. Now, let's talk outcomes. If the export friction story is real in a meaningful way and delivery pressure remains elevated, the market tends to move into one of 3 paths. Path 1 is resolution. Supply appears, premiums soften, delivery windows tighten again, and the story fades. This is the best case scenario for the system. It means the market was stressed but not broken. Path 2 is controlled repricing. The chart price begins to move higher, not because of hype, but because price is doing its job. Rationing demand, attracting supply, restoring balance. In this scenario, premiums may remain elevated for a while, but the gap starts to narrow as the official price catches up. This is the market admitting reality through price. Path 3 is dislocation. This is the Silvergeddon vibe people are talking about. Premiums remain stubborn, delivery times keep extending, large bar availability tightens, and regional price gaps persist or widen. In this scenario, the paper price loses authority, not because the chart disappears, but because people stop treating it as a deliverable truth. They treat it as a reference number that does not guarantee access. And that is the psychological shift that breaks systems, because once a market becomes access-based, price becomes secondary. Now, let's be clear. Even this third path does not require the world to run out of silver. It requires the market to believe that deliverable silver is scarce relative to claims. That is a ratio problem, not a total quantity problem. Now let's get practical. If you want to follow this without being played, here's exactly what you should do. First, stop staring at one chart candle. Charts can lie to you in the short term. They can stay calm while the physical market is screaming. Instead, watch the real-world friction indicators, premiums, delivery windows, availability language, large bar supply. Second, watch whether the story spreads. A single market can spike due to local factors. A multi-region persistence is different. If premiums stay high across multiple regions and delivery windows extend broadly, that is a sign of deeper stress. Third, watch whether institutions change their behavior. Do spreads widen? Do quotes become less firm? Do large orders get harder to fill? These are not viral-friendly signals, but they are the signals that matter. Now, I want to ask you a simple question. If you could only watch one signal over the next 36 hours to judge whether this is real stress, what would it be? Premiums, delivery times, vault inventory trends. Drop your answer in the comments and tell me what country you're watching from, because this is the advantage we have, a global network of observers. If the gap is real, it will show up in more than one place. And if it's just noise, the signals won't cluster. That's the difference between entertainment and evidence. Empires do not collapse from a single headline. They collapse when reality and the official story stop matching, and the system can no longer force people to believe the numbers on the screen. Silver is one metal. But the mechanism behind Silvergeddon is the same mechanism that has reshaped power for centuries. Supply tightens, trust weakens, claims become questionable, and the world starts paying for certainty. That's the real story. If you want more documentaries like this, subscribe to Money and Empires, and in the next episode, we can go deeper into one of these three. How delivery systems actually work behind the scenes, how cash settlement becomes the warning sign, or how historical empires handled metal shortages, debasement, and the loss of monetary trust. Tell me which one you want next. Because if this countdown is real, the next chapter is already being written. And it won't be written by the chart. It will be written by who can deliver